Hey guys, it's Miss Parrish. I am coming to you tonight or today to talk to you about. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure my sound is working for you guys. Um, going to talk to you today about on your study guide. So, you were supposed to complete the study guide on your own to see what you could do on your own. And so if you're watching this video now, you should have already completed the study guide and are just using this to check yourself and see how well you did. So you'll know what you really need to study most for the test tomorrow. Okay. So follow along with me here as I go over the study guide. I would recommend that you mark your items right or wrong, or write down which questions. I know since you did this online, write down which questions you missed and what you should have written as the correct answer, and use that to go back and study to help you prepare for the test. Okay, or if you want to make corrections, and then submit your study guide at that point. But we want to make sure that you understand how to work these so you can do your best on the test tomorrow. All right, so let's look over this. We're going to be using this graph right here to answer and solve questions 1 through 4. So all of these will involve the coordinate plane. So number 1 says, what are the coordinates of point A on the coordinate grid? So you want to look over here on your coordinate plane, and there's point A. You do have 4 choices here, multiple choice. Now remember, when you're plotting a point, you always start in the center at the origin. And remember, when you graph a point, you go left or right first, and then up or down. Okay, you go across the x-axis, left or right, and then up or down. We called it dribble and shoot. Okay, so the first number in your ordered pairs represents the number on the x-axis, and the second number will represent the y-axis, the up or the down. So if I was plotting point A, I would go over to the left, go underneath where that dot is. So I'm going to dribble over this way to the -2. So my x value would be -2. So looking at my choices here, A, B, C, and D, I can go ahead and eliminate choices A and C because they do not start with -2. Okay, I'm going to use a different color ink just so this will stand out. So that leaves us with choices B and D because they both start with -2, and that's where we are when we dribble over. So then I'm going to shoot up, and if I'm going up, I'm in the positive numbers. Now the dot is between the 2 and the 4, and I know if I'm counting between 2 and 4 comes 3. I notice I'm up in the upper section, so that would be a +3. So that would eliminate choice B, and I would choose B as my choice. Those are the coordinates of point A. Question 2 says, what quadrant is point D located in? Well, right here is D. Now, if you remember, on when we studied the coordinate plane, the 4 sections are called quadrants, and they are numbered. This is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. Sometimes we use Roman numerals, but that's quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how they're always numbered. So you could put this as in quadrant 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Point D is in quadrant 4. Then 3 and 4 wants you to plot points. Number 3 says plot the following ordered pair on the graph to the right and label it point B. So remember, you start at the origin in the center, and the first number is 3. Remember, now we dribble then shoot. So if I'm going to +3, I would go this way. And then the second digit is a 0. So that means I do not go up or down. I would stay right here on the x-axis. That is a terrible dot. Let me hold my computer still here. And then label it with a B. Now, I know you couldn't label that on your Google Slides, but you should have a dot there. And anytime you label one, that's what you would do. Okay. Question 4 says graph and label the following points. And so for point W, now I know on your Google Slides you had different colored dots. So make sure that you put the correct colored dot I probably should have highlighted. I highlighted those the same color, but you had a certain colored dot since there was no way really for you to label. So for point W, for 1 and 3, I go over to the positive 1, dribble over to 1, shoot up to 3. So your W should be right there. X, again, start at the center at the origin. -2 is over to the left. And then -3 goes down. Your negatives are down here. So this would be point X. Go back to the origin. Point Y is -1. Dribble over to -1. And then +5. Positive is up. So I shoot up to the 5. So that one would be point Y would be right here. And then for point Z, your first number is a 0. Remember, your X coordinate tells you whether to go left or right. So if it's a 0, that means I stay right here. The next number is -4. So I would go down to -4. So that's going to stay right there on that Y-axis. And there's my Z. So that's 1 through 4, plotting points on a graph. Okay. Number 5 is talking about independent and dependent variables. Remember, the dependent variable is the number or the part of the problem that depends on something else. In an equation, the dependent variable is always your answer or your y value. But this is not an equation, this is a word problem. It says Tina is working a golf tournament. She gets paid $22 for each hour she works. She worked for 18 hours. What is the dependent variable in this situation? So you have 4 choices. Choice A says the number of times Tina drove the golf cart. Does driving the golf cart have anything to do with her working? No. So that we don't want that one. The hourly wage she makes. Well, she gets paid $22 an hour, but is that dependent on anything? Is her hourly wage dependent? Well, we'll think about that. The number of hours she works and the amount Tina got paid. So these 3 are kind of tricky. Now, when you have a job, you get paid so much per hour, and that's just a set amount. Okay, it's not dependent on anything. So her hourly wage is not a dependent variable. The number of hours she works doesn't depend on her pay or anything like that. So the amount she got paid is her dependent variable. Anytime you're dealing with a problem with money, the amount you spend, the amount you get paid, the amount you earn, that's going to be your dependent variable because that depends on something else. It depends, in this case, on how many hours she works. The more she works, the more she gets paid. The less she works, the less she gets paid. So her pay is your dependent variable because it depends on how many hours she worked. All right, number 6 is also independent dependent. A box of Girl Scout cookies costs $6 each. As the number of boxes Miss Klein buys increases, the cost increases. So what is the independent and dependent variables? Well, we're talking about the number of boxes that she buys and the total cost. So does the number of boxes she buys depend on the total cost, or does the total cost depend on how many boxes Miss Klein buys? Okay, you want to think about that. Just like in the previous problem, we talked about how anytime you're dealing with a problem with money, the amount paid, the amount you spend, the total cost, all of that's going to be your dependent variable most of the time because it depends on something else. So in this one, the number of boxes that Miss Klein bought, sorry, number of boxes is your independent, and the total cost is your dependent variable because the total cost of the cookies depends on how many she buys. It tells you right here, the more she buys, the more her cost is. Okay. I know on those independent and dependent, they can be a little tricky. So just think about what's depending on something else happening. All right, number 7. Which of the equations below represents the relationship shown in the table? Now, remember when we did tables, you're always going from the X to the Y. Okay, so in this case, we're going from the 2 to the 14 and the 4 to the 28 and the 6 to the 42 and so on. Okay, so remember when your numbers are getting bigger, you're either adding or multiplying because we're going from 2 to 14 and 4 to 28. So we know we're adding or multiplying, so we don't want to pick B or D. That's already eliminated two choices just by looking at that part. Okay, so what can I do to 2 to get to 14? Well, I can multiply 7. I can also add 12. So I've got to decide, though, which one of those rules holds true for the other problems. Well, 4 plus 12 is only 16, but 4 times 7 is 28. So my rule for each of these is times 7. Not sure what's happening with my pen here. So my rule is 7 times x. Always look and see what's happening to get from each number to the other. Remember, if you get bigger, you add or multiply. If your numbers get smaller, you're subtracting or dividing. Number 8, Paul graphed the equation y equals 4 plus x. Which point does the graph not pass through? Okay, now what you would do with this situation is, remember, in your ordered pairs, the first number is your x value and the second number is your y value. So what we can do is we can take each of these x values, each of the first numbers in the ordered pairs, plug them in for x, and see which if you get the y value for your answer. Okay, so these you're going to have to kind of work out. All right, so let's take A. Our x value is 0. So if I plug in 0 for x, okay, here's my x. This is 0. So plug 0 in for x. What's 4 plus 0? 4. So that's what we have for y. So that one's correct. Our question says which one does it not pass through? That means which one of these would not have the correct y value. So let's try B. Y equals 4 plus, what's my x value in B? 6. So what is 4 plus 6? It is 10. Is that what we have for our y value? Yes. So B is correct. So let's try C. Oops, sorry. This pen is giving me trouble tonight. 4 plus, what is my x value in C? It is a 3. Man. And what is 4 plus 3? It is 7. Is this a 7? No. So that means that would not be a correct ordered pair for the graph. And you could test the last one, plug 12 in for x. 4 plus 12 is 16. So that one would be correct too. So you want to choose C. This would be the one point that the graph would not pass through because we got 7 over here when we worked it out, and that has 12. So that does not work. Okay, go to the next slide. A teacher wants to buy pencils for her class. The amount of pencils purchased by the teacher and the amount of pencils available in class are your variables. Okay, so we have the amount of pencils purchased and the amount of pencils available in class. So which is our independent and dependent variables? Okay, are the amount of pencils purchased by the teacher dependent on, now this one's worded a little tricky. We have trouble with this every year. Is the amount of pencils purchased by the teacher dependent on the amount of pencils available in class, or the amount of pencils available in class dependent on how many's already purchased by the teacher? You have to think of it like she's already purchased pencils. She's not going to the store. She's already purchased them. So in this one, the amount of pencils available in class, if you could see how I'm having to write up and down, you would understand why I have trouble with this sometimes. Pencils available. I'm literally writing straight up and down. The pencils available in class are dependent on the pencils that the teacher has purchased. Okay, just think the more pencils your teacher purchases, excuse me, the more pencils you have available to use in class. Okay, so that one's a little tricky. You have to kind of think about it in a different way. But the amount of pencils available in class depend on how many your teacher has purchased. Okay. All right. The next questions say use the table below for questions 10 and 11. All right. So this is canoe rentals. Our X value represents the number of hours you can rent the canoe. The Y value is the money or the charge to rent that you would pay for the canoe. So for 2 hours, it's $20, 5 hours, $50, 7 hours, $70. So number 10 says write an equation that expresses y in terms of x. That's just saying write an equation using y equals. Okay, remember we always start equations with y equals. Well, before we can write our equation, we have to find our rule. We have to see how we're getting from our x to our y. Again, we're getting bigger from 2 to 20, 5 to 50, 7 to 70. When you get bigger, you're either adding or multiplying. So if you look at this, you can see that they're all in increments of 10 for the charge. So we would multiply each of these by 10, okay, to get from the number of hours to the amount they would charge you. So our rule is times 10. So our equation would be y equals 10x, or x times 10. Now, knowing that, question 11 says, how much does it cost to rent a canoe for 3.5 hours? Okay, so pretend that you put 3.5 up here in the table. We know our rule is times 10, so all you have to do is multiply. I'm going to go to the side and multiply 3.5 times 10. Okay, so that would be 5 times 0 is 0, 0 times 3 is 0, drop a 0, 1 times 5, 1 times 3, add that up. Don't forget your decimal. Move out, move in. If you left that at 350, you should be able to look at your table up here and see that 350 would not fit between 20 and 50. 3.5 would fit between 2 and 5, but 350 wouldn't fit, so that wouldn't make sense. So always remember your decimal. So for 3.5 hours, it's going to cost $35 to rent the canoe. So just take your rule and multiply it times the number of hours. Okay. Number 12 wants you to graph this equation. Okay, graph this equation. This kind of goes with what you did on Friday. So to graph the equation, we want to plug in for our x value. We want to plug in 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so that means we're going to plug each of these numbers in for our x value. Okay, so go to the side. If on your paper, you should have worked this one out. So y equals 3 times x would be 3 times, what is my x value? It's 0. And what is 3 times 0? 0. So that one's going to be 0. Next one, y equals 3 times 1. What is 3 times 1? It is 3. Next value for x, 3 times 2. 3 times 2 is 6. Last value for x, 3 times 3. And 3 times 3 is 9. So that's how you complete your table. You take your x values, plug them into your equation. 3x means 3 times x. So 3 times 0 is 0. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. So now that we have our table completed, we can graph. Remember to write your ordered pairs. There was a text box for you to write your ordered pairs. It was kind of where I just worked those out. But your ordered pairs will be 0, 0, 1, 3. You just pull your x and y's from the table. 2 and 6, and 3 and 9. These are your ordered pairs, your x and y values. Okay. So now you would plot those on the graph. 0, 0 just stays right there at your origin. 1, 3, remember, dribble then shoot. So dribble over to 1, go up to the 3. Okay. The next one is 2 and 6. Dribble over to the 2. Shoot up to the 6. 3 and 9. Dribble over to the 3. Shoot up to the 9. And remember, when you do this, they should form a straight line. It can be diagonal like this, but when your table has the same rule, that means you get your y value the same way each time, in this case times 3, you will have a straight line, okay? So that would be how you would have graphed that. All right, number 13, which is a correct description of the values of the ordered pairs for quadrant 2? Now, remember on the coordinate plane, if you can flip back to the coordinate plane in the other section. Sometimes if you forget to do that, you can quickly draw a coordinate plane. And remember, this is quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. Goes backwards, okay? So they're wanting quadrant 2, so that's right here. So again, you can flip back and look at this one. When you go to quadrant 2, you have a negative x value and a positive y. If you're doing it on your own, you can think to yourself, if I go this way, that's a negative x. So you want to find the one that's got a negative sign first. So it's not that one. It's not that one. Those both start with a negative sign. So I go negative, and then when I go up, that's positive. So I would want to pick D as my choice. Okay, so make sure you know those quadrants and you know where they are positive and negative. Okay, it might be something good to practice writing down a little bit. All right, last two questions. Number 14 says the table shows how much Eric earns for pruning trees. Write an equation that relates T, the number of trees pruned, to, let me read that again. Write an equation that relates T, which is the number of trees he pruned, to P, the amount he earns. Okay, so this is your trees pruned would be like your X, and pay would be like your Y. Okay, so again, you're going to go from here to here. You got to find your rule. What am I doing? I'm getting bigger, so that means I'm either adding or multiplying. Well, 2 plus 28 is 30, but 4 plus 28 wouldn't be 60, so that means I got to multiply. So how many times does 2 go into 30? If you're not sure, you could go to the side and divide that. You could also divide 2 into 30. You would find that that's 15. I do not know why my numbers are moving around. That is very odd. Times 15. It's kind of got a mind of its own tonight, much like my smart board in class. So these would be times 15. So my equation is y equals 15x. Okay, so the first part of my problem wants me to write an equation. It is my rule is times 15. So 15x, y equals 15x is my equation. The second part says, where it says solution, it says solve your equation to find how much Eric earns if he prunes 7 trees. So if you plugged the 7 up into your table, how much would he get paid for 7 trees? Well, that means 15 times x would be 15 times 7. 7 times 5 is 35. Carry the 3. 7 and 3 is 10. So he would get paid $105. And that should make sense because that number would fall between these two, where the number 7 would fit between them in the table. Last question. A balloon rises 100 feet in 4 minutes, 125 feet in 5 minutes. Write and solve an equation to find the distance the balloon rises in 8 minutes. Okay, well, you might be able to figure that out with these numbers, but they need an equation. So I'm just going to make a little mini table down here with my X and Y. We'll have minutes to feet, minutes to feet. So I've got to figure out how I'm getting from 4 to 100 and 5 to 125 because I need that rule in order to write my equation. Okay, so how do you get from 4 to 100? Think about coins. What 4 coins equal $1? quarters. So that's times 25. Again, if you didn't know, you could have divided 4 into 100. 5 times 25. So my equation is going to be y equals 25x. 25 times x. So the next part of this says for 8 minutes, how high would the balloon rise? You take your rule of 25 times x, do 25 times 8. 8 and 5 is 40, carry the 4. 16 and 4 is 20. So that would be 200, sorry, that's not a good zero, 200 feet. 200 feet. Okay, so check your answers on your study guide. Make corrections on your paper if you need to, just so you can see on some of these what to do. Your test will have problems very similar to this, so you want to make sure that you know how to work these so you can be prepared for the test. Okay, if you struggle on the coordinate plane, look back at your notes, look back at what you did on here, make sure you know how to graph an equation. Think about independent, dependent variables. Those can be a little tricky. Number 8, we did not do a whole lot with. So make sure you understand how to solve number 8. It's not hard if you know how to do that. Again, more independent, dependent. Make sure you understand the quadrants and how to plot points. Please review this information so you can feel prepared for the test on tomorrow. Make sure, as always, if you have any questions at all, feel free to contact your teacher, myself, Mr. Hardner, Miss Klein. We are always happy to help you. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you prepare well and do well on our tests tomorrow. Have a good day. See you guys.